Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Is it still morning? Just. My discussion subject, you guys can move to the next page, please, is again something that the previous speakers, and I'm just going to very briefly show you these slides, because the discussion today is more about what have we done and where are we in delivering certain solutions where communities are already benefiting. And I think that's what needs to go out into the public domain is guys, we cannot wait. There are solutions that work, and if we work together, we actually can implement them. That's the long and the short. Now, in South Africa, the economic downward spiral from 2010 has been a whole range has been a downward, a number of percentages down. If we can get the next slide. There we go. And you can see what's happening in the economy. And if those of you that's still living in Pretoria and Gauteng, Joburg area, there's very few. If you had this conference in Cape Town, we would have packed the church. So if any of you are wondering where are the South Africans, they've immigrated down to Cape Town and Western Cape area. But the Western Cape is not spared. It's simply lagging. So what we are seeing in the Western Cape today looks great, but what's coming to the Western Cape, the guys are still living in a relative fool's paradise in the Western Cape because they are going to be touched. And that's something that we can see. I mean, in 2018, we had a 72% availability factor, and in 2022, 59%. And from the changes that's happening in Eskom and what we're seeing from the outside and kind of in the inside, that's not going to change anytime soon. We're going to see that trajectory. Think of a massive ship. Eskom is a massive ship. To turn 40,000 employees around and move into the right direction. Guys, when you take over a business which is failing, what do? You have to get rid of 90% of the staff, and then perhaps you have a chance. Now, what are we going to do with 40,000 people? So exactly as the previous speakers have said here today, the answer is not in leaving it for somebody else. The scale is simply too big. If we can go to the next slide. Firstly, for any of us to do what we do, whether it is as solar installers or battery installers or salespeople, what do we need? We need basic services for ourselves. If the water and sanitation doesn't work at home and the electricity doesn't to an extent work, can we continue with our work? No, we can't. So basic service delivery is the start of it. Secondly, how can producers and businesses produce or grow if they don't have energy? And for that whole host of reasons that we see there, from number 1 to 8, you can pick. At the end of the day, it's Eskom, it's the state, and it's policy. Because although there are solutions, and that's what I want to dwell on, that's why I'm going through these slides just quickly. You know these answers to these slides that you're seeing now. But we cannot do what we need to do, although we are able to do what we need to do. And that perhaps seems contradictory, and I'll explain to you now why I say that. Coming to why are businesses and producers closing up shop? And it's simple. We cannot irrigate with diesel. The supply point supplying the pivot point is 3 or 4 kilometers away. You put your diesel there, the batteries are then stolen, and then the diesel is stolen from the tank. It's just not feasible to run these operations. It just doesn't work. Secondly, and we've heard about that this morning. We've told a number of farmers, they said, you know, Chris, you guys are doing work for yourselves only, but don't you want to just help us with a quick 200 or 300 kilowatt system? We say, no, Our view is your best bet is to wait a little bit. Wait and see, because for every person to do their own thing is not the financial answer. How many farmers do you guys know, and colleagues and neighbors, that have installed massive plants? They're still paying the bank back the 10 or 15 or 20 million rand. And where's the benefit? They're not making those payments. That's just a further burden. And the government laws and regulations, which is basically closing down everything. So we know all these issues. Can it be different? If we can go to the next slide. This is what we have done. We're looking at the entire service value chain, because that's really what it is. You want electricity controlled at your metering point within your facility. That's actually all that you want. In other words, you want continuity, you want quality. So what do you need there? The bedrock that it starts with is your information platform. If you don't know what you are currently using, and people say, no, I'm sending you my electricity accounts, because all the other installers just wanted my electricity accounts. Really? What do you do with that electricity account? There's a load factor of 5, 10, 50, 90%. What are you actually giving me? So you cannot deal with a lack of information. If you don't have the information, and you say to guys, say, well, can you help me? I say, well, just start by putting in a meter. What does a meter cost? Well, perhaps 2,000 rand or 3,000 rand plus a comms device, plus your electrician to install it. So let's say 10K a point. Oh, crazy. I said, how do you mean crazy? You're just contemplating buying a PV plant for 20 million rand. Now you're moaning about the 10,000 rand metering point. Seriously. It's crazy. So we need to get our alignment right. We need to make decisions on actual, tangible information, which is not happening in the marketplace. There are too many tiers in the marketplace, and you just need to look at the tiers, and you know that we still have not grasped the fact to make decisions based on good information. You want good information. Secondly, you want to deal with credible and knowledgeable staff, or knowledgeable services providers, or knowledgeable partners. Where's the farmers that couldn't adapt to the new way of farming with technology and everything else? They're out of business. And it's exactly the same. Now energy is a crisis. You need to have your grouping, and that grouping that you're getting involved in has to know what's really going on. Thirdly, your policy certainty. So in this area in Mafube, we have policy certainty. That's why it's green. We know municipality, what's the municipality's role? They have a limited role on the outside. What is the role on the inside? We have control over the role of the inside. So it's working. Everybody there knows what to expect from it. Then the efficient administration and technical services. If you don't, and you can't service your community and your users properly and efficiently with quality, you can go onto the bank and actually get your statements whatever time you want to do. You can transfer your funds whatever time. Why can't you do that with your basic services? Why do you need to go into the municipality? These are all those little niggles. If these things aren't in place, guys, we're not going to fix the problem. The quality network. Yes, so we're thinking about PV plants to be installed. What are we connecting them to? As you heard from Eskom, every time we install a PV plant, we're actually transporting power in reverse. Our networks, even on your farms, are not designed that way, because all the thin cables are at the end of the line. So now you put a very nice big PV plant at the end of the line, and you wonder why the conductors burn off or the jumpers burn off the whole time. Our networks were not designed. So long before you start thinking about a PV plant, you need to think, how is the energy going to come from the PV plant into where I need it? Long before. Otherwise, you sit with the problem Eskom is sitting with now. They know where the renewables are going to come from, but nobody planned to actually build the lines because the money was used for other purposes. Then we get to energy continuity. Well, it's nice to say to the guys, we told you so, but we're the ones not selling electricity because Eskom is off. And if Eskom is off and we're not selling electricity, what happens with our overhead costs? And everybody is in the same boat in this country. Farmers, production guys, producers, processors, all our overheads remain, yet our revenue is reducing. That's the problem. And we need to understand that. And if we don't get the energy continuity right, what's going to happen with tariffs? Tariffs are still only going to go one way. It's going to go up. Because there's too little of it. And if there's too little of something and it's unreliable, what happens with the price of it? We're in trouble. If we go to the next slide. So Mafube's pathway to the turnaround. Solar is not the solution. Solar is a solution. Very important solution. But just solar is not the simple answer. Your grid connection position, exactly what we discussed. Where is that solar going to be located? And think of it now as a small grid. We're not talking Eskom, we're talking small. We're talking a community of 15,000 customers that's getting their electricity. Where do you put that PV plant? The internal distribution networks. We started about 4 years ago constructing power lines in town, strengthening networks in town to accommodate when we do build the PV plants. And then the PV plant was built, not the other way around. The rest you can read, but the important one is the communities in support. Guys, the 20 agri-unions or institutions that they are outside representing farmers, representing business. Everybody is going to have to leave their baggage on the outside as far as energy is concerned, and everybody is going to be forced the leaders to actually sit around the table and come up with a centralized energy solution plan. Because if we can resolve the policies in government, then we can all go back to doing our own thing in our way and actually making a living or not. But then we all have a fighting chance. But without the community support, without the community, without business, without the township guys, without the farmers, there is going to be no solution. And we all need to get on board there. And we really need to forget our affiliations, and we need to focus on the goal. Because can you imagine, this project of ours is operational. I'm going to show you the successes. Do you think we got money from any bank for what we did? We got money from no bank. What did they say? They say, listen here, the only thing you guys are doing is you're putting a few nuts and bolts, and what is that worth? What can I sell that on an auction? So it turned out we built our 100 million rand power plant in a year with own equity, 21 shareholders actually, sorry. And in a year, we collected the 100 million rand and we built our own thing that's working. Now that it's working, the banks are still sitting, yeah, but, you know, where's government? And why is government not involved? And seriously? We're showing the returns, we're banking the cash. We have a serious problem in our banking system in South Africa because everything was turned state-wise. If the state is not involved, it's probably contestable what you guys are doing and you shouldn't be doing. But at the end of the day, if we don't keep VKB's lights on at the processing plant, they're culling another 1 million chickens because they can't feed them. Because they don't have enough time during the day to actually process the feed. Simple things. So where are we going to draw the line? And if we can go to the next slide, this is what our useless project, as one of the big banks, one of their renewable heads called it. A useless project that's worth nothing. Now this is what nothing looks like, guys. And you need to see that. In that little small town of Frankfurt, the water and sanitation pumps are now running 24/7, operating. People, at least now during load shedding, have got access to water. Okay, well, perhaps mostly. The municipality is still providing that service. Secondly, the network backbone remains energized. Where we had an instance of high voltage theft, every load shedding session, every day we spent anything from 20 to 100,000 rand to fix the infrastructure that was stolen. We haven't had any instance of network theft because the backbone remains on now. Not one. Thirdly, our customers, we went on a blitz to send a social media questionnaire to all our customers. We have all their meter numbers, account numbers, cell phone numbers. We sent them a questionnaire and said, do you want one long outage a day or do you want many small outages a day? And it came back split. Like 70% said they wanted more outages but shorter, and the other 30% they want long outages but less of them. Okay, so how do you do that in a small town? Well, you know, if you planned it correctly and you fixed your infrastructure before you applied the PV plant, you suddenly have options because you have a serious grid that's now installed. You can feed the town from both directions. And the moment you can feed the town from both directions, then you have opportunity to actually say, large power users, we leave you on your section. We did a few upgrades to the infrastructure in town. And all the big users are now off 7 hours during stage 6, or what should it be during stage 5? 7 hours in one go. So that means they're producing for the other 18 hours of the day without any interruption. And the small guys, all the residences and businesses, we put on 1.5 hour cycles. So now they're off 1.5 hours only. They're not off 2 hours and then skip every third day like with Eskom. So although the 1.5 hours seems less than what Eskom is load shedding, it's not less, it's exactly the same time. We just routinely stick to a similar routine every week. So you know, week 1, you're going to be off between these times, finished. And it's only for 1.5 hours at a time. So now the community is saying our fridges are staying cold, our batteries, we can work, we don't have to pay that huge amount of our own storage. Suddenly everybody can cope. And our big customers, they also okay because we've given them what they want. And what happens now? They all pay again. They can pay. And then along comes our embedded generation, where the 21 shareholders in the community clubbed together, built the PV plant. And what could we then do? I counted the last week. We have a weekly report that goes to Eskom as well. In the week of the 22nd to the 28th of February, Eskom required 276 hours of load shedding for that week. Now, 276 hours, we have 5 zones in this particular town. In those 5 zones, if all of them were off 276 hours. We reduced the 276 hours to 226.5 hours. That doesn't seem much. That's only 18%. But that 18% is load shedding that didn't occur during the daytime, which is massive. Why? Because we have another source. And this project of ours that we have with Eskom, we call it a demonstration project. Because Eskom, believe it or not, although we built the plant, we've asked them, guys, do you want any surplus energy? Because if we load shed still certain, we now are throttling the plant. Don't you guys want it? You can have it free of charge for this period that we're in any event doing the demonstration project. It's not much. It's probably 300-400 kilowatts max at a time that could go to Eskom. The guy said, no, they're still busy with their technical analysis. We don't want the electricity, so we dump it. Can you imagine? Country where there's no milk, then we throw the milk away. This is exactly what's happening. So we're sitting with a challenge centrally. Hence is the solution should happen in every small town across this country. Instead of the solar installer trying to get you to install not a 200 kilowatt plant, but a 300 kilowatt plant. Get the neighbors together, form your own little co-op. Do your own thing as farmers together. That's the only way we're going to have these growth nodes that we can actually get this done. Because with this solution, and that's the actual result, this worthless result that we've achieved here, gives hope. And all the guys now you go and try and buy a house in Frankfurt. See what you can buy for 2 million rand. Where in Paris or in Harrismith you can actually buy a nice house for 500k. Ask yourself why. Because the community has taken charge of its own destiny in a place like Frankfurt. What's the next one is Villiers. We now collecting money for the Villiers project, so that we do exactly the same in Villiers. In Tweeling, an even smaller town, we already have 500 kilowatt operational. We're now going to go after the end of the month's Eskom session. We hope to introduce exactly what we're doing in Frankfurt in Tweeling. Who would have imagined that you were in a place like Tweeling and you don't have load shedding in the day? Gee, that's actually quite nice. Next slide. So just on that, in the last week, that week that I'm talking about, 25% of the energy use in that entire town came from renewables already. 25%. That's nothing to sneeze at. So what's our next steps? Is Frankfurt, 12 megawatt hour battery system, centralized. Who's going to pay for that? The community is going to pay for that. Everybody that makes their contribution in that business is going to get the electricity at the same rate that was promulgated. All that we do is we club together all those funds, put it in a centralized place in town, and we take stage 6 load shedding perhaps to stage 1 or maximum stage 2. And suddenly everything works again. Then to actually deploy the PV and lithium ion to the rest of, to the other 2 towns remaining, add a bit of wind, hydro on a small scale, increase the PV with another 80 megawatts, interconnect those 4 towns so that they're no longer dependent on the Eskom power lines. And while we interconnect the 4 towns, we pick up all the farmers in that 4 towns, which now all of a sudden means that they are able to irrigate with largely green, which means they can produce with largely green power. They can process with green power, which means the border adjustments in the EU is actually going to be a boon. They'll probably get 20% more for their crops. So all of a sudden we've turned a negative spiral into a positive spiral because the community is now cooperating. And that's what you need. You need the entire community to operate. And at the end of the day, who's going to pay for all of this? The hydrogen and the ammonia is going to pay, because that goes to the 4 fertilizer factories owned by the same farmers, all within 50 to 80 k's from Villiers. And they now have a local supply and a vested interest. Can you imagine talking about a positive? So you guys sitting in your communities, it's time now to leave your ego, go back to Jan, say to him, Jan, you know, how are we going to cooperate and put this thing together? Because that's the only way this is going to work. And these big hydrogen and ammonia plants, we're not going to produce fertilizer, but these plants actually subsidize the entire electricity supply to the community. So their normal supply is now subsidized by the hydrogen and the ammonia. And the farmers benefit from the hydrogen and ammonia that's being produced, because they're not waiting for that to be imported from elsewhere at massive rates. They get a consistent supply at a consistent price. So we actually can reduce the cost of our program. So the last slide, if we just go to the next one. Unified voices. And unified voices, government and SOEs, has to create the bandwidth for communities to do their own thing. They have to provide that bandwidth. If we don't have space, we really may as well then pack up and leave. If everything is against the law that we do, it's like, there's no food. Okay, I can put my own millipita in my backyard to at least feed myself. Government says, sorry, you're not allowed to put your own millipita. If there isn't in the central depository, then you're going to starve. That's the way it is. And if that is the outlook, ultimately, then we have a problem. We should have all left with our colleagues years ago. Secondly, we need to mobilize and petition civil organizations, foundations, international agencies to actually say, guys, we have solutions here. We can actually look after ourselves. Just give us the opportunity. And what is the opportunity that we need? There's only one opportunity that we're busy addressing as we stand, is the fact that I cannot provide my surplus energy to my neighbor. I cannot because I have the knowledge and I generate efficiently and cheaply. I cannot provide to all my neighbors that surround me. I'm not allowed to do that. Does that seem at all plausible? We then went to Eskom and we said to Eskom, and we've been busy with them for 3.5 years now, guys, these 10 farmers is a case study. We want these 10 farmers, the farmers want their own grid. The lines are 40 years old, they're lying on the ground, it's basically worth nothing. You guys can't maintain it. If there's a failure, it takes you 2 or 3 days to fix the failure. They sit without electricity. So why don't you guys, for 10 farmers, what can the revenue be? We've seen it, 2 million rand a year. 2 million rand a year, guys, you can't maintain the infrastructure for 2 million rand a year. The farmers will do it themselves. Give them a bulk point, they can put up their own solar farm, they can put their own centralized diesel gen for them to operate it when they want to have it operated, and they can put their own centralized batteries because it's a seasonal crop. They irrigate only in certain times of the year. Suddenly those farmers can operate. And if you don't want to give us your networks, tell us how much it costs, and if you don't want to tell us how much it costs, we'll build our own. And Eskom says, but those customers are our customers. We're not going to relinquish our distribution license. So if they don't relinquish the distribution license, even though we're sitting with the money, we're sitting with our colleagues, we're sitting with our neighbors, we cannot fix our problem. So if there's one thing that should be in all of your minds is, we need to change the Electricity Regulation Act so that I can help my neighbor, so that I can help my community. And that's something that is not in play, which means we're actually talking and having a nice symposium here about a whole lot of topics. But how can we fix it? Because the answer is not in your own solar plant and your own batteries. The only answer is for all of you guys to club together, and certain towns and certain agricultural areas can actually start looking after themselves. They all have strengths. And that's my story. I hope you guys will dream about regulations from now on and not dream about batteries and PV panels, please. Because therein lies the key. Thank you.